"Will you marry me?" It had been a year since we started dating. He presented me with a ring. Our relationship began with deep love, and we had always considered it as a precursor to marriage. We wanted to have 2 children after marriage, ideally a boy and a girl. I felt reassured when he said, "Let's cooperate in both housework and childcare." So I happily accepted his proposal. My name is Emily. I am a 26-year-old office worker living an ordinary life, but my destiny changed about a year and a half ago at a business social with a client. I fell in love at first sight with a man my age named Jason. With the help of my friends, I managed to get close to Jason, and after some persistent effort, we started dating. 6 months later, and then after a year, we got married. Being married to you makes me so happy. Living with the person you love is fun, he said. Although it started with my one-sided crush, Jason truly loves me. As we had discussed during our dating days, we shared household responsibilities. However, things changed after a particular day, 6 months into our marriage. I discovered I was pregnant. "Now that I'm going to be a father, I need to work harder," Jason said, increasing his overtime hours more than before. But I was suffering from severe morning sickness, almost bedridden. I felt vulnerable and wished he could come home early and be by my side. I couldn't express these feelings to Jason, who was working hard, and time passed until I reached my 2nd trimester. Perhaps Jason thought he needed to earn more for our child. The promise we made at our marriage seemed forgotten, and he stopped helping with the housework, maybe thinking I had enough time since I was at home. Ideally, I would have liked to go back to my parents' house for childbirth, but they had passed away. My in-laws live nearby, but I'm not close enough to rely on them. So I faced a difficult childbirth. Before I knew it, my son was a month old. One day, Jason came home unusually early and plopped down on the sofa. "Man, I'm beat today. What's for dinner?" "Sorry, I'm just about to start cooking." Why our son's night crying was severe, and I couldn't sleep properly at night. During the day, I was overwhelmed with childcare and housework. If he had told me he was coming home early, I would have been prepared. Swallowing these thoughts, I headed to the kitchen. "This Sunday, my parents want to celebrate the birth," he said. "That's right. They mentioned it during their last visit. Should we order in? Maybe roast chicken, since Mom and Dad are coming. Let's splurge a bit." "Okay, sure," I replied. Although a week seemed alarmingly short, with my hands full of childcare and housework, I hadn't even managed to order the roast chicken. On Sunday, I tried to order it, but it was too early and I couldn't place the order. Just then, Jason finally woke up. So I thought of asking him to handle it, but instead he said, "I'm off to work," and left. Eventually, busy soothing my son, I missed ordering the chicken and couldn't even eat myself. But I thought my in-laws would understand the situation if I explained it. Holding my crying son on the verge of tears myself, my in-laws arrived. It was much earlier than expected, but I wondered what had happened. As soon as they entered, my mother-in-law, Susan, picked up my son. "Has he been crying this whole time?" "Jason used to cry a lot when he was a baby too," she said. My father-in-law, Bob, came in carrying a large bag. He proudly showed it off, saying, "What do you think? It's an appetizer platter." We ordered it, but thought it wouldn't be enough, so we spent the morning making extra just for you. It took longer than expected because Bob kept interfering, but he insisted on making something special for you. Susan added while laughing. I honestly admitted that I had intended to order roast chicken, but hadn't had the time. "Don't worry about that. You're tired, so don't think about unnecessary things and just rest." "Okay, let's make some sandwiches instead," Bob said, rolling up his sleeves. Then, realizing there was hardly any bread left, he rushed out to buy more. Susan told me to rest while she took my son for a walk. Gratefully, I lay down on the sofa. After a while, I was awakened by the sound of the front door. "Emily, what are you doing?" It was Jason. Weren't my parents coming? What about the preparations? He said to me, still groggy from sleep. He then saw the appetizer platter brought by his parents. Is this all you prepared for today? You did order the chicken, right? Well, I couldn't order it before I could finish. Jason suddenly got angry. What? You bought this cheap trash when my parents are visiting? Trash? What is he talking about? I was too stunned by Jason's outburst to speak, and he furiously knocked the platter off the table. As I stood in shock, Bob and Susan entered through the front door. What was that noise? Is everything okay? Bob, carrying bread, and Susan, comforting my son, were surprised to see the scene. The next moment, Bob was furious. Jason, what is this? Unabashedly, Jason retorted, What do you mean? How can I serve such cheap stuff to my parents who have come all this way? But Jason, it's not like that. Struggling to find the words, I was cut off as Jason and Bob began to argue. You've left everything to Emily. If you think it's cheap, you should have prepared it yourself. Why should I? I asked for roast chicken because you were coming to celebrate, and she's been home all this time. She could have managed that right. The other day there wasn't even dinner ready when I came home, and now this cheap stuff for today. What's going on? I was infuriated by Jason's words. That was brought by your dad. What, in a moment of realization, I unleashed all my pent-up frustration. Your parents made it. How could you say such awful things? Wait, I didn't know. Even if you didn't know, I never thought you'd treat food like this. That's just awful. Jason turned pale. Besides, you've stopped helping at all, and you've been so hard on me since I've been home. I'm always on edge taking care of the baby 24/7. Have you ever helped? Well, I hold and soothe him sometimes, only when he's in a good mood. You've never held him when he's crying. Whenever he starts crying, you hand him to me, and at night you leave the room saying it's too noisy. All the thoughts I had been holding back since our child was born just spilled out. I couldn't stop myself anymore. Do you think I'm resting while you're at work? That's impossible. I'm not in perfect health, and getting even 2 hours of sleep is a struggle. Why should I have to take care of you too? In the midst of endless childcare, I continued, tears streaming down my face as I confronted Jason. Bob became even angrier and reprimanded Jason. You've been like she just said. You should take better care of Emily. After putting my son to bed, Susan comforted me and joined in the scolding. That's right. Postpartum is physically and mentally challenging. Jason, even before the birth, you were hardly at home. Jason, flustered, finally spoke up. It was work. What could I do? I thought I had to earn more now that I'm a father. But what if Emily had gotten seriously sick? What are you talking about? Both of you keep saying, Emily, Emily. You're just worried about her because you're happy about the grandchild. You hardly even know her, Jason said, sounding resentful. Indeed, we hadn't held a wedding and had little interaction with Bob and Susan. My parents passed away in an accident before I married Jason, so we had our wedding abroad, just the two of us. We only properly met Bob and Susan for greetings. Although their home was just a 30-minute drive away, our interactions were limited as I mostly accompanied Jason when I was pregnant. Bob and Susan said they would help, but I thought it wouldn't work out well since they were practically strangers to me. But that changed about 2 months before the due date. How are you feeling, Emily? Can Bob and I come over? Suddenly, I received a call from Susan. I was surprised by her offer, but since I had no reason to refuse, I told her I would be waiting and started tidying up while holding my heavy belly. Then, almost immediately, the doorbell rang. It seemed Bob and Susan had already arrived. What's going on? Hello, we called from nearby because we thought you'd start cleaning if we said we were coming. Are you going to have lunch? Can we join you? Susan, a brisk woman whom I had found a bit intimidating, showed such consideration that I was almost moved to tears. Just sit down, Emily. We'll take care of the rest. Bob insisted as he and Susan started cleaning up. Honestly, I was too tired and in pain to move or clean. I had planned to have a simple lunch. Since going on maternity leave, the lack of social interaction had been stressing me out, so their visit was a pleasant surprise. They had been worried about me, but hadn't contacted me, not wanting to impose. Apparently, they became alarmed today after calling Jason and learning that he had been working late and mostly just sleeping at home. I was so happy about their visit that I waited to tell Jason when he got home. He returned past 11 p.m., noticing. Since then, Bob and Susan had been helping regularly, but I never had the chance to tell Jason. I assumed Bob or Susan had mentioned it to him, but it seemed everyone thought the same, and no one had told Jason, who just found out about my friendly relations with his parents. Jason looked pitifully embarrassed. So I'm the husband and their son, yet I'm the only one left out. I had calmed down, but his words reignited my irritation. Left out. I tried to tell you many times. I waited for you to come home, but when I was up, you just got angry about me being awake. Maybe you have something to hide. I ended up saying what I had been reluctant to say. It had been bothering me since that day. Hearing that, Bob and Susan seemed to brace for the worst, but Jason vehemently denied it. No, that's not it. Absolutely not. How can you be so sure? You don't have any proof, do you? There's no proof, but I was worried about your health. It was late at night, and there were times when you woke up in pain, so I thought you should be sleeping. I felt a tear form at Jason's words, but my anger was still stronger. Then what about that time you came home early and arrogantly complained about there being no dinner? That was when Jason began to speak uncomfortably. It turned out that on that day, he had made a mistake at work, got scolded by his boss, and was advised to leave early due to working too much recently. So he left at his regular time. How could I tell you something that embarrassing? That's why I took it out on you. Sorry. Maybe Jason was truly trying to be a good father. That's when we finally started to have an honest conversation. Jason began to cry, explaining that when our son cried, he thought it was better for me to hold him because he stopped crying faster. I thought I had to be firmer as a father. I believe that while a mother can be indulgent, a father should be strict. Though his words were somewhat disjointed, Jason was certainly trying to be a good father. It was our first child, and I had been anxious, but so had Jason. Jason cried like a child, seeing him like that. I couldn't help but start crying too. Then we heard our son crying in the next room. Bob and Susan picked him up, soothing him while they started to laugh. What a family. This is funny. Like father, like son. Let's see who stops crying first. In the end, our son was the first to stop crying. This incident seemed to change Jason's heart. He started balancing work and spending more time at home. I had thought about divorce at one point, but I'm satisfied with how things turned out. It seems Jason's ideal of a father was a silent, strict provider, but it was so contrary to his character. I wonder why he ever held such an ideal. He seems to have realized this too, as it has become a part of his embarrassing past. Whenever the topic comes up, he turns red and flees the scene. He's become more tender with our son and even responds to the night crying. We're expecting a daughter next. Jason and I are eagerly awaiting her arrival.